Good evening, everyone. We're going to wait for a few more participants to join us. I see there's a number of people coming in now. Okay, we're up to 12. We'll get started in just a few seconds. Okay, let's get started. My name is Laurie Mcgavin Bachmann, and I would like to welcome you to our program tonight on behalf of the Adult Programs Department here at the Ridgefield Library. This program is part of the Ridgefield Pollinator Pathways series and is presented by the Ridgefield Library, Norwalk River Watershed Association, and the Ridgefield Pollinator Pathway. This is the last in a series of 7 presentations we have had over this past year, many of which have been uploaded to the Ridgefield Library's YouTube channel and can be seen in the Adult Programming Environmental folder. Tonight we have a very exciting program lined up in which will take the form of an interactive panel discussion. The title for our talk is Restoring Wild. We have 3 panelists, Louise Washer, Mark Fowler, and Penn Marshall. We will take questions at the end. I would first like to introduce our moderator, Louise Washer, who will in turn introduce Mark Fowler and Penn Marshall. Louise Washer serves as president of the Norwalk River Watershed Association and has been on the board since 2010, having served as president since 2016. She is also on the steering committee of both the Hudson to Housatonic Regional Conservation Partnership and the Pollinator Pathway Northeast, which she helped to create in 2017 in Wilton and Ridgefield, which now connects over 235 towns across the region. She is also a graduate of Smith College. Will you please welcome Louise Washer?
Thank you, Laurie. That was a full-on bio. I appreciate it. I'm so happy to be here with Penn and Mark and to be able to ask you all my questions and also hopefully facilitate a good discussion with everybody who's here tonight. I'm just going to dive right into introducing you guys. Mark is going to speak first, kind of about the big picture of biodiversity issues that rewilding can help address. And then Penn is going to talk about more what we can do in our own backyards and the smaller scale, I think. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Mark Fowler is a National Geographic Channel filmmaker and Emmy-nominated wildlife television host who grew up in New Canaan. Didn't know about the Emmy. Cool. In addition to his film work, he serves as Vice President of Wildlife and Conservation at the Explorers Club. Mark graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in environmental studies. He devotes his career to preserving the natural world, restoring endangered species, combating wildlife trafficking, and inspiring the public to experience the awe and wonder of nature. Mark serves as Nature Initiative Director for Grace Farms Foundation, which is how most of us know you. And Mark is going to go first, but I'm going to go ahead and introduce Penn too, and then you guys can just do a seamless transition. Penn Marshall, with 10 years of experience in fine gardening, project management, and ecological restoration, Pennington Marshall has become a leader in natural areas and meadow management. With hundreds of acres of native meadows seeded from Virginia to upstate New York, he has broad understanding of what it takes to build successful meadows from seed. I cannot wait to hear about that. Thank you so much. And Penn, I think you worked on the Grace Farms meadows. Is that, are you guys together? Cool. Okay, so we'll talk about that too. And so I wanted to say to everybody who's here, please put your questions into the Q&A. I don't think we can unmute you because of the nature of this webinar, but I am going to read out everybody's questions at the end and we'll facilitate a discussion that way. So Mark, take it away.
Hello, thank you so much for the awesome introduction, Louise, and I appreciate the Ridgefield Library for inviting us to be out here on this wonderful evening. Look at this, it's getting dark. We just had a big rainstorm. We're here at Grace Farms. I know many of you want to come here and haven't seen us for a year, so we're very excited. We'll be reopening in September and welcoming everybody back to celebrate nature and explore the beautiful 80-acre preserve we have here. For those of you who haven't been here, I'm excited to host you when you come here. We'll be doing birding and meadows walks and astronomy and fall foliage walks. So it's going to be it's going to be a wonderful sort of re-entry into Grace Farms. And I'm just excited to be able to talk about our Restoring Wild program. We've been working on this sort of ever since the inception of the idea of Grace Farms. I'll just share a little bit of our history with you. Back in 2007, our board and our founder, Sharon Prince, they decided that this last piece of land in New Canaan, this last large 80-acre preserve, it was an equestrian center, and it had gone up for sale. And there were something like 10 or 15 McMansions that were already approved. I call them McMansions, but it was going to be totally developed. And it was by far the last largest piece of undeveloped land in New Canaan. I was actually here with my father in 1992, the first time it went up for sale. We were flying birds of prey, and we were working with the Audubon and the Land Trust and the Nature Center to get the town on board to purchase the land, because this is such a beautiful piece of property. So I'm very honored, after Grace Farms Foundation was formed and saved the 80 acres, I'm very honored to now be here, 20 years later, hosting you all and being able to tell the story of this land and the beauty of biodiversity that exists here. I don't know if you all remember my father, Jim Fowler from Wild Kingdom. We were flying hawks and eagles and falcons right here on this property. So it's a culmination of a lot of hard work. So when the foundation bought this land and was able to save it from development, the first question they asked was, how can we restore this land from pasture grass? It was essentially horse pasture grass, which many of you know there's no biodiversity in pasture grass. In fact, it's an invasive species. It was introduced to the United States for horses, which are also non-native. So we had a situation where our foundation said, okay, if we're going to bring this land back to its original state, what will it take to restore wild on this property? And that's when this incredible project began. So Sharon Prince and the founders of Grace Farms Foundation, our board, Sharon Prince brought in Olin, which is an incredible landscape architecture firm, and they also brought in Larry Weiner Associates, of which Larry Weiner was sort of the founder of the Restoring Meadows ideas. And we started doing that. And guess what? His number one guy on the East Coast was Penn Marshall, who we now have here on this Zoom call. Penn is an incredible meadows expert. I will tell you, he basically established the meadows here at Grace Farms on behalf of Larry Weiner Associates, and now runs Pennington Gray and has been maintaining the meadows. And I'll tell you something. I was here when it had all been planted, and in 2015, 2016, when that meadow came up for the first time, I will tell you something, it exploded with life. It went from just regular pasture grass the year before to totally beautiful, plentiful flowers, native, pollinator friendly, pesticide free flowers blooming all over our 80 acres. And life just flew back to the property. And that's what I'm going to show you today. I'm going to show you some of the beauty of our property and sort of what we've been focusing on restoring. So I will screen share what I call our Restoring Wild program. And I believe we're going to I think we're on full screen. Can you tell me for sure we're in full screen?
We can see your thumbnails, but it doesn't matter.
Okay, well, I will figure out how to get this correct. So now we will go to, I'm in full screen. That's interesting. Okay, well, you may be able to see the thumbnails, but I'll just give you a taste for our project here at Grace Farms. So pollinators, we're focusing on restoring wild, and the idea is that we can all restore the wild environment in our own backyards. Right here in suburban and even urban environments, we can restore wild. And wild, to me, people think of wild as something you have to go to out to the Mountain West to find something wild. You have to go to the mountains or the jungles or the tropical jungles or forests. But in reality, wild is in our own backyards. Wild just means, in my humble opinion, a place where native animals can thrive alongside humans. I mean, it's beautiful that native animals can thrive in our forests, and all we have to do is give them the ability to thrive. So that's where the incredible work of restoring native meadows has come in, because when you plant a meadow, you're giving Mother Nature everything it needs to bring back all the life to that land. So I'll give you an example. Like I said, bees, birds, butterflies, beneficial insects, they all came immediately back to Grace Farms. Here we're focusing on pollinators. We've got something like 300 species of pollinators in Connecticut. Just 300 species of native bees. I mean, how incredible is that? I think it's even, Louise was telling me it's something like 324 species of native bees. So it's incredible that we have this diversity of life right here in our own state. And, and right in this region of New England, we have this incredible biodiversity. So if we look at pollinators, let's take a look at what the challenges have been and what we've been establishing here at Grace Farms. I'll read from the slides a little bit. The pollinators are vital to creating and maintaining the habitats and ecosystems that many animals rely on for food and shelter. Now, if we look here is the benefits of pollinators, because when you plant native pollinator-friendly plants, you're trying to bring in the pollinators, and here's the benefits. 75% of the world's food crops depend in part on pollination by bees and other insects. So that means 3/4 of the crops that we grow in the world depend on them. 1 out of every 3 bites of food that we eat was in some way impacted by a bee or an insect that pollinated it. And then what I really like to see is here, sort of it's called the ecosystem services that pollinators provide. $217 billion are provided by pollinators to the global economy when you take all of the incredible work that they do for us. So it's very important for us to preserve and protect and restore pollinator habitat. Now, what are some of the causes for pollinator decline? One, parasites. That sort of comes from the honeybees colonies. They actually have some parasite issues. And what's interesting is honeybees are non-native to the United States. Not many people know that. Honeybees were imported. In fact, when you establish a honeybee colony, many times it says Italian bees you're bringing in. So they believe that maybe when they bring in these species of honeybees, that maybe there are parasites that come with them. But, I'm talking about yes.
Oh, sorry, I'm interrupting you, Louise. I don't think your slides are advancing. Somebody's.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm just going to go back to the main.
There you go.
All right. So there's pollinators. Is that advancing now?
Yes. Gotcha.
Okay. So we're back to this. Yeah, here we go. So why pollinators are important. We're good? Okay. Sorry about that. Causes for pollinator decline. Here we'll talk about this a little bit. Parasites, that's more of a honeybee issue, but I'm really focused on the native bees and butterflies and birds and pollinators. Climate change. So as we all know, we're dealing with many challenges of climate change, but I would argue we obviously know that that climate change is causing all different challenges around the world. But if you look around us in New England, we are so lucky because the forests have come back. These were all the forests around us in New England and in eastern New York State, et cetera. All these forests were cut down all throughout the Northeast. There was 90% of the forests were cut down in New England, but the forests are back. And because we are now something like 70% or more of New England is forested, we have all the wildlife back. So it's a beautiful, thriving time period for New England. And I look at our area and I say, we are a climate change success story. We went from fully deforested, fully transformed when it comes to, we had no trees. They dug up the soils. They planted crops. I mean, this place had been fully transformed. And those rock walls in your woods are a perfect example of proof of what the colonists had done. But now we have thriving forests. Do you know Connecticut is I believe it's #2 most forested urban state in the nation. We have more forests in urban areas than any other state. I mean, I think we're #2, maybe even #1. So we have, an incredible state. And so climate change is affecting us. But most of all, I think it is we want to fight climate change. We want to absorb carbon. Well, guess what? Meadows, native plants and meadows, #1, they don't need watering. Okay, so now water, which is another one coming up, is a challenge when it comes to watering lawns. And now we don't need to water our meadows. So that helps with water conservation. From a climate change standpoint, these meadows absorb incredible amounts of CO2. So meadows have 20-foot deep roots. I mean, it's incredible. So the plants that you see in the summer and in the hottest days of summer out here at Grace Farms, which you'll see this fall, they're thriving in September, October. Those meadows have 20-foot deep roots. So even in the worst, hottest part of the year, the driest, even if we're going through a drought, those roots are tapping into water that's 20 feet deep. So it's incredible how they will be blooming and they'll be thriving, and all the pollinators are thriving. So these are ways that we see benefits. But climate change, parasites are challenges. Disease, obviously, disease is the other issue I was talking about with the honeybees. That's not as much of an issue with our native bees. And then habitat loss. Now, habitat destruction. The truth is that habitat destruction and habitat loss is the largest challenge facing all life on Earth. And I think when we lost our habitat during COVID, we as humans lost our habitats. We lost our ability to even go see our other Homo sapiens. We lost our ability to even socialize with our own species. I mean, this is a good example of habitat loss. Well, when it comes to the natural world, every time we plant a lawn, we are taking away from other habitat that could be beneficial habitat. Lawns have lawns, as we know, have zero biodiversity, and they take tons of water, millions of gallons of water per day. So what I would say is we're actually restoring habitat by creating native meadows here at Grace Farms and all of the Pollinator Pathway. The Pollinator Pathway is incredible, and the work that Penn Marshall does with Pennington Gray. This is the cutting edge of restoring wildlife habitat and creating habitat instead of losing it. And then also we believe, and it's been proven that pesticides, herbicides, pesticides, the reality is we want to go to a pesticide free eventually. As little pesticides as possible we all want to use, because those pesticides, they affect the natural systems. They affect, we know that they, in many ways and in different ways, they affect the life and the pollinators. So we believe that, like the Pollinator Pathway, we can reduce pesticide use to near zero. We can also, those pesticides do not flow into the rivers. And that's what's really another beautiful benefit of native meadows. Here's another one. Guess what? We don't need to use petroleum and chemical fertilizers. So no fertilizers, no pesticides, no watering of meadows. I mean, these are incredible benefits that these native meadows do. So obviously, here's what they think we see on pesticides. We think that they weaken navigation function on the pollinators, create developmental defects, and potentially cause colony collapse. Those are some of the challenges that pesticides may cause. So protecting pollinators, here's just some benefits that we want to talk about. And this is what we've done with Penn Marshall and we work on with the Pollinator Pathway. Landscaping with native plants will attract more native pollinators and provide host plants for some species. So here's just some of the benefits. Pollinator habitat creation, we went through that. As you see here, native flowers and grasses function like a natural ecosystem, creating and providing food and shelter for birds, butterflies, beneficial insects, bees. Reduce use of pesticides, we've gone over that. It will only benefit us. It doesn't end up in our waterways and in our oceans. As well as improved air quality. This is incredible. Right now, they believe that 5% of all carbon dioxide emissions in the United States are due to lawn equipment. It's due to lawn equipment mowing lawns. I mean, what a waste when we could have these incredible native plants around us that are thriving. And this is also what I spoke about here, if you see on my slide, a carbon sink they cause a carbon sink. The extensive roots cause a carbon sink. So we're absorbing, just the trees on Grace Farms, 2,000 trees on Grace Farms, they absorb 100,000 pounds of carbon per year. So since 2007, we're talking about over 1 million pounds of carbon that have been absorbed. Okay, and then let's just do the benefits of landscaping with native plants. As you see here, they don't need to be mowed like a conventional lawn, reduce demand for non-renewable resources, and improve water quality. And they eliminate or minimize pesticide and fertilizer use, and they don't run into our lakes and oceans, causing dead zones. So Grace Farms, here's a beautiful shot of our incredible river building, and you'll be here in the fall to come visit us, and we're very excited to have you here. And then, as you see here, we have an 80-acre preserve with many different habitat types that we've restored. There's a beautiful shot of us on a late summer day. And here's the meadow grasses as they grow. This is a wetland meadow, which is very rare down near. We have a beautiful wetland meadow. I'll tell you something. We have kestrel falcons that fly to that little tree you see there on my PowerPoint. There's a little kestrel falcons that nest and mate in that little willow. I mean, it's incredible the habitat what one little tree can do. So here we go. Here's some of our beautiful birds that we have here. We have over 100 species of birds that have been seen and confirmed here at Grace Farms in our birding program. There's our forest. We have over 50 species of trees here on Grace Farms and over 2,000 individual trees. And here's our beautiful cattail pond. So you're all welcome to come here. You see in the front, you see the cattails. Those are rare because of invasive Phragmites. We're very lucky to have cattails on our cattail pond. Here I am with just a little fun. This is the female snapping turtle that every year tries to lay eggs in the gravel along the river building. So I have to usually relocate her back to what I call Snapping Turtle Pond. It's a beautiful pond here, a natural pond here at Grace Farms, one of our 3 ponds. And I just want to thank you. I mean, I've shared a lot of information, but I'm so inspired with what the Pollinator Pathway is doing, and I'm so glad that the Ridgefield Library is supporting this, and I can't wait to have Q&A with everybody. Penn Marshall's coming up. The guy is incredible. He knows every Latin name of every single meadow plant you've ever seen, so I've got to tell you, he's the guy for the details, but I'm excited to continue on and hear his presentation, so I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Louise, for letting me speak, and I look forward to hearing Penn's presentation.
Thanks, Mark. That's awesome. I love watching your slideshow. I've done it many times, but every time I see it, I'm like, there's something new about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that spot. And then I look in the background, I'm like, oh yeah, and there's new like outcropping of plants I didn't notice before. So super jazzed and really excited to get back on Grace Farms and see it. Having been part of that program since we started in 2014 in the fall, and seeing it to where it is today, it's incredible. All the way down to the parking lot islands are just, everything's been rehabilitated, restored, wild, 100% habitat. So thank you for the intro. I'll share my screen and I'll just quickly talk about how to build a meadow, and just give you guys some more specific details relating to the construction and building of a meadow. Not going to go in depth because most often my lectures are 2-3 hours long, and then I'm still talking and people still have questions, and it's just everybody's property and interest is different. So I'll do my best to cover some ground. Okay. Awesome. So, excuse me. First off, Pennington Gray is a firm that I started after I left Larry Wiener Landscape Associates in 2018. And we have some goals. This is a great photo of Grace Farms in the background. Like I mentioned, the parking lot islands are fantastic. Probably the best you'll ever see. Creating moments for our clients and the public is one of our goals as a firm. We really enjoy those text messages from our clients of a flower, of a bird, of a butterfly landing in their landscape. And it just shows us that they can take that moment and really appreciate their landscape and their native surroundings. Big advocate of the people that work for me. Equitable labor conditions is a huge importance to us. Getting everybody above living wage for the areas that we work in, not just the areas that our employees reside in, including health insurance, retirement, offering things like that, paid vacation, stuff like that is very important to me. and also about giving back to the social good of our workforce as well. Overall, our goal is to move away from traditional thinking in landscapes and landscape management. And so we're doing that bit by bit, and by incorporating native plants, meadows, and all sorts of alternative techniques to traditional sort of quote unquote mow, blow, and go firms. So lastly, we like to give back, contribute as much as we can. We try to give back 5% of our profits annually to native land trusts and land conservation. So, and we also do lots of donation planted projects and things like that as well. I also am a board member at the Ecological Landscape Alliance. One of the reasons that I bring this up is because it is a phenomenal resource for information as far as articles, videos, newsletters, and it's all free to use. I encourage you to be a member because I think you gain more access and you get on recurring notifications for presentations and things like that. The big thing for me with the Ecological Landscape Alliance is it's not bound to just the East Coast, and it's not just bound to professionals. It's open to homeowners, it's open to enthusiasts, part-time interest people, and it spans the globe actually because of this past year, everybody being remote. So I think there's over 11,000 participants or 12,000 participants and 1,000 active members currently. It's really about giving you a manual for land management. It's a great place to start to get some resources, get some ideas, and finding out who to be talking to and who to be contacting and where to start. So I encourage you to check that out if you need an additional information and resources. So we're going to talk about making meadows and natural areas restoration. Rewilding is a passion for mine, and rewilding goes beyond just meadows. It's also forestry, shrublands, wetlands, and all sorts of it, everything in between. This is a great aerial photo showing a smaller property that's maybe 5 acres and incorporates a beach ecosystem, a wetland ecosystem, dry upland meadow, and of course your primary living areas for humans. Mark touched on a lot of the stuff and got me super jazzed up, and I'm like, you stole my thunder, but I'm really excited by everything. I'm going to drop some really dry facts in there. We often think about when we build construction and new housing and new developments, and when we clear forests and land, the first thing that everybody goes to is turf because it's traditionally inexpensive. Everybody knows how to do it, and it can go down and gets green in 20 days. And that's like super easy. Everybody's like, fantastic, get it green, we're good, not mud, I'm happy. Unfortunately, turf requires a huge amount of high input, 80 million pounds of pesticide, 9 billion gallons of water annually. And as Mark pointed out, 5% of our air pollution in the United States is directly related to the lawn mowing and weed whackers and backpack blowers and things like that. Specifically, their exhaust because they're often inefficient machines and they're 2-stroke engines, and there's a lot of additional CO2 and carbon dioxide. So one of the alternatives is meadows, especially when we're talking about an open, sunny system. So no irrigation, high carbon sequestration. They're doing a lot more research in California about this. I did some anecdotal calculations. There's 96.75% less air pollution than turf in a given acre. So meadow requires a lot less input. Natural areas, green infrastructure, native plants and meadows can act as an infrastructure element within our urban settings. One of the things that's being missed in a lot of the urban developments that we're doing is we're just storm draining and that goes into a wetland. You can use native plants to filter that water, to slow the water inertia down and have more resilient ecosystems within our urban environment. So that's a really important, awesome part of restoring wild. It's restoring wild in our cities and in our urban areas as well. Big question we always get, cost per square foot on installation and maintenance of a meadow. I call installation and maintenance as one package deal for me. It's usually a 3-year program. In this case, I did a 6-year program because that's about the break-even point for the cost per square foot on a meadow becoming more cost effective than turf. So this is a per square foot per acre cost. Turf seed annually would cost you 65 cents per square foot to install and maintain. And that 65 cents perpetuates for the rest of the life of the turf. It doesn't go down. and Meadows is at 55 cents. And I think last year, I have a quick note about this on my slide. Last year, our average client spent 5 cents per square foot maintaining an acre of meadow. So even though we calculated it at 55, that's being very generous. It came out to 0.047% or cents per square foot. So to talk a little bit about the process of building a meadow, we start with design. Design has all these different elements: client analysis, site analysis, goals, strategy, plan of execution, and maintenance. This is a brief rushed overview of meadows because the whole presentation isn't just about this. Site analysis, looking at what we got, evaluating what your site conditions are, what you want, how you get there. From there, we take those internally and we develop seed mixes that are going to relate well in the plant community for that site, specifically for the soils, for the light, for the hydrology, for that site to be best represented with the proper ecological plant community. We also offer a live plant selection that's going to enhance and add additional biodiversity to the meadow system, especially plants that don't come well from seed. This is a great way to add them to your meadow so that you don't have to wait 7 to 10 years for them to naturally occur there. The conventional process that we use is herbicide application, and we use water-safe herbicides. It's a necessary evil for us. It's a one-time application. It's not a continued application. Sometimes it's 2 applications. And then what we do it selectively, as you can see in this photo, we preserved half an acre of royal fern, a sensitive fern, and we got rid of half an acre of mugwort. In the end, it got seeded and is doing well. And this is actually in Wilton, Connecticut. And after the herbicide eradicates all the undesirable vegetation, we go into seeding. We use Truax drill seeders, which is an expensive piece of equipment. Not everybody has access to it. I understand that. There is ways to do hand seeding. There's lots of alternatives for smaller projects. We use them because we do a lot of acreage and it's the most efficient way for us to work. We also use the tractors for other aspects of our management, like our first year mowing. First year maintenance on a meadow is different. You have to mow it maybe semi-weekly at about 6 to 8 inches tall to keep the weed seeds from generating. So it's different than every other year. After the first year, we move on to just a regular annual maintenance mowing program where it's just you mow it down once a year, done. No more inputs other than that once a year mowing. We do use heavy tractors. One of the advantages of a heavy tractor that a lot of people don't realize is they think they're dirty, they're greasy. They're actually generally ecologically friendly because they're diesel, so they require less fuel. They run at a lower temperature, and they are heavier and more powerful in torque so that they can work through these areas without expending additional fuel. That's my brief how to build a meadow. And I'm sure that's like, okay, everybody has 1,000 questions. If you build it, they will come. This is a great photo of what a second year meadow looks like when you have your biennials coming on the first year. Everyone goes gaga for this, and then you realize that that is not what your meadow looks like every year. It's a fantastic 3 weeks in the second year, but it gets more magical and more diverse as time goes on. So I'd like to invite Louise and Mark and everyone back, and we can sort of dive into sort of some questions and see where we go from there.
Thank you so much. I actually do have a lot of questions. I want people to put their, I wish we could unmute people to just ask you, but if you put questions into the Q&A, I will ask them. But I had a question right off about, that's so interesting that when you first put in the meadow, you mow more often. Yeah. So is that, tell me about that.
Yeah, speak to that. So the idea is that I have a slide I usually include in this. What happens is the meadow seedlings that are coming from seed, they're babies, right? So they spend the first year putting all their energy into the root system that goes down beneath the ground so they can access nutrients, water, and sustain themselves for the future years where they're going to put on more vegetative growth. Those guys are maybe like 2 to 3 inches tall, sometimes 4 inches tall for the entire first season, but yet their root system will be 1 foot, 2 feet deep. Mark touched on these meadow plants having 20-foot deep root systems. So what happens is we have annuals that want to like germinate from seed, shoot up to 2 feet tall, put out 1,000 seeds, and smother these guys out. So the idea of the mowing is that we mow above the little baby plants, and we knock the seed heads off the annual weeds that want to take over. providing these little guys sunlight and reduce their competition overall. So.
Wow. So that deals with mugwort even? Is mugwort is something that shoots up and yeah.
Yes and no. Mugwort is a really difficult plant to deal with. And you bring it up,
Yeah.
of course, that's the first plant you bring up.
But I think that I'm going to try that. I'm doing little sections of my lawn, and that first year, I'm going to do it. Okay, a lot of questions here. Hold on. How can I get rid of an invasive plant in my woods? Butterbalm taking over the skunk cabbage and everything else except the trees. Near a stream that goes into the Norwalk River, what can I use to kill it?
Oof, that's a really good question. So I don't know what butterbalm is. Do either of you?
I don't. I have to look up that.
Maybe a different, those generic names are a little different than, you probably know the Latin name, I would believe, but we'd have to see the plant.
Yeah. There's a couple opportunities with butterbalm. I'm not sure what it is. Because it's skunk cabbage, that means that you have a wet area. So you should use a selective wet safe herbicide. I'd probably say something like either Aquanite or triclopyr. Both of those would damage skunk cabbage, but skunk cabbage is an ephemeral. So actually when it gets hot later in the season, skunk cabbage leaves will go away. And that produces what we call like an opportunity window where you could treat the butterbalm that does have leaves on it still, where the skunk cabbage is going dormant. So it's a window of opportunity, but you have to be careful not to damage the skunk cabbage or make sure that it's not gonna photosynthesize and absorb that chemical.
Yeah, and I would add, I'm Googling it and I'm not sure I see what that plant is. It would be good to figure out exactly what that plant is. And that is always so fun. I always use gobotany.org. It's a native plant trust that takes you through, a plant identification process that anybody can do if I can do it. And so figuring out first what is the plant, and then actually you can email either of us back, right, to find out what to do, because before you go and use an herbicide, you want to know.
Yeah,
because like if it's an annual, you would treat it differently than.
Yeah. So to Luis's point, like we always recommend, like I might say herbicide. That's for me. I'm a licensed applicator in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. And I do this for a living. So it's not like go out there and go nuts. I actually recommend speaking with someone professionally, like whether it's your current landscaper or gardener or horticulturist, unless you're comfortable and licensed and familiar with the products. Make sure you know your plant, know your herbicide, know your environment, and know the ramifications of using that herbicide. Super important.
Okay, another one. And I always worry about this. Wouldn't mowing harm the animals that have created nests or other homes in the meadows? So like if an egg has been laid on that leaf.
I mean, yes, it will. And Mark, you can speak to this too. Like the amount of wildlife that comes back. This is one of those necessary evils that it's a pain, and in the temporal, like the long-term trajectory and growth of this meadow, this is a blip in the next 30 to 50 years.
And I mean, I've noticed here that we only do it in the winter where all the animals are in the holes or have migrated. Most of the time when we mow, it's in an off season so that there's less of an impact on native species.
Yeah, and Penn, maybe talk about that, the timing. Once you're
the timing for annual mowing, always in dormant season, before nesting happens, usually late February, early March. For the regular mowing of the first year meadow, there's not a lot of nesting insects and birds in that because it's not a really vegetatively thick and it's not desirable habitat yet, but it's getting there. But yes, March is like early March, late February, that's the key time. Mowing from the center out. That way the animals can escape out to the sides and you don't disturb them. I know with Mark, we've gone out and we've done raking through the meadows with sticks and brush to make sure that everything's cleared and scattered out before we start. So, yeah.
And I'll tell you something, the raptors love those days. They're like, man, we're cleaning up. No, the raptors, we have so many raptors here at Grace Farms, which I love. We have hawks and falcons. And so anyway, come see them. Go ahead.
Okay, one more. So Suzanne Benton, who asked that original question, is asking if you can put that insecticide that you mentioned in the chat. I think she means herbicide, but
the herbicide. I can I can put that in the chat. It's just I recommend Aquanite for this application, but again, you need to identify the plant correctly and make sure that you're using the proper herbicide. Every herbicide has a different mode of action.
And then I don't know, Suzanne, I know Suzanne's a great artist actually, but I don't know what town you live in, Suzanne, if you want to put that in, because the Pollinator Pathway, we can send somebody over to help you identify that plant. So yeah, if you want to, you can just email me about it. Oh, you're in Ridgefield. Okay, cool. What we could set that up if you want to, and I'll put my address in the chat, but it's info@norwalkriver.org. And then we can at least figure out what that plant is.
And by the way, everybody, the Pollinator Pathways, if you don't know what the Pollinator Pathway is, Louise and her team they're incredible. I mean, how many cities is it now, Louise?
Mark is going to be our PR agent. We need to get you out there, Mark. It's
Anytime.
250 towns now.
250 towns. It was like 11 2 years ago. That's amazing.
The truth is that this is just something people are ready to do. And once they get the name and they get a few, don't have to reinvent the wheel, they can download the brochure and get the sign. It's like, it's happening on its own. This is just a wildfire. Okay. So we have more questions about invasives. So truly inspiring, 2 questions: the importance of ponds, and is there a minimum square footage that you need to make a viable meadow? That's a good question.
I can jump on the meadow, the size, meadow size wise. Every practitioner has a different decision to make, but I think any meadow is just any area that's free of shrubs and trees. So any garden can be considered a meadow because it's habitat. The animals use it the same as a meadow. It doesn't really matter. I think practitioners and designers have different opinions. Personally, I don't consider anything less than 10,000 square feet a meadow because of how I treat it, because of all the external inputs outside. So if you have a long strip of meadow that's like 10,000 feet long and 1 foot wide, I wouldn't treat that in the same way as I would a 1 acre meadow or a 10,000 square foot square or circle, because there's so much edges to it that could be exposed to external inputs.
But would you also, as far as the ponds, I mean, I can tell you that they're full of life. So the best thing you can do is put as little, fertilizer on your lawn and pesticides, and plant native plants, because they will strengthen around the pond. They'll strengthen the soil around the pond, and it can actually really benefit everything. And also, even if you just have a swamp behind your house, those vernal pools are super important. I mean, they're super important for amphibians. They're incredibly important for life. So, if you have a pond, a lot of people are scared of ponds or don't like having them in their backyard. The truth is that they're so important for the web of life and for life in this region.
When you see a living pond, when you see one that has biodiversity, it does not have green scum on top of it. And That's the right. First most important key thing is to not have that fertilizer and the pesticides. Yeah. It's just the coolest. What's cooler than, I have a pond near me that I call the newt pond, because there are just so many newts in the spring. I never knew it until COVID, and like they're swimming around and there's egg masses, and I'm like, oh my God, these are all native, blueberry trees. Like, discovered this pond, and I just like never paid attention.
And the birds and the ducks and it's just incredible the amount of life that exists in these small ponds around our region. It's just, we're so lucky. So I'd say embrace it, and if you don't put the fertilizers, you don't have all of that algae bloom, so you can actually really enjoy them.
And let the plants be around them. Mowing to the edge is the killer. Okay, best time to plant is the next question.
I mean, for me, it's if you have water anytime, but fall. I definitely prefer fall.
You don't have to water through the summer.
Yeah, you don't have to water through the summer.
But with plugs, can you put plugs in the fall?
You can. We like to plant them at a slight angle because the frost likes to push them up, and so if you plant them straight down, they'll like push right back up and with the frost and heave. So we plant at a little bit of an angle, and we still often get them pushing up. So a walk through in March and stamping them back down with your foot is a good way to.
Oh, so interesting. Okay. And then Roberta, who's an expert herself here with Columbine LLC, which I highly recommend. What methods do you use to deal with Phragmites?
It depends on where they're located and what systems are around them and what the body of water is connected to. But we've done a lot of different methods. I'm, again, low impact for me. It sounds crazy, but I like using an herbicide in Phragmites. We treat them at the end of the summer. So when they're in full plume, would be end of August, mid-September, something like that. I use Aquaneat at a 5% solution rate. If there's no trees in the vicinity, I like to use other chemicals like Polaris, and Polaris would be my go-to. But again, understanding your bodies of water that you're impacting. A lot of times you need to contact wetland inlands to make sure that you're not, it's whoever's adjacent to your pond and whoever's downriver from you, that's where the real issue is. And you need to be aware of that before you treat anything. We also used dredging turbines and small dredgers that actually grind the root system up. But I find that that's a lot of disturbance, because then you have these dewatering ponds, and then you have to reseed them and things like that. It works well, especially if you don't want to disturb somebody downstream. It's a good way to do it.
We
And
are
then-
actually tarping some frag down
Yeah.
at Woodward Avenue Park in South Norwalk. If anybody wants to come check out what that looks like, and we're doing smaller. We're not dealing with the kind of acreage that you are, so we can try this. But we're doing that in a couple places, and I'll let you know in like 2 years. I was going to ask at Grace where you have the cattails. Where's there Phragmites there?
You know what? We have a very healthy cattail pond. So we have very little Phragmites on the property. And, we do our best to not use any, pesticides. We use manual labor. We have the most amazing team of people here that take care of the grounds. I mean, our ops team is just amazing. So, the truth is that, if you're gonna try to get rid of Phragmites, you need to cut the tops off. You need to get rid of the seeds. You have to do everything possible to not let it spread when you do cut it. And then, and so we find that it's actually, if you disturb the cattails, that's when the Phragmites come in.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. A healthy ecosystem of native plants, they can fight, most of the time they can sort of, that's where they're supposed to be. But if we disturb them, that's where we run into any kind of Phragmites challenges.
Okay, more questions. We got so many questions here. Teresa Looney, I recently converted a 60 by 60 foot weedy area of my property into meadow. I sowed seeds 2 weeks ago and they are starting to germinate. Do I need to water the area at all? I've read different opinions online. Thank you.
No, it depends on what you see.
You don't have to water it?
Yeah, but don't water, because what happens is the weeds will take up the water too, and then you'll have even more weeds to deal with. The native species like hot, dry, droughty things. The hotter it gets,
even when they're just like little teeny seedlings, they're gonna be okay. Cool.
Just leave them alone. Like that. I mean, that's why we use native plants. Is like if they are in full bloom and they fall off that plant in August when they're full bloom and done flowering, that's where they're going to germinate and grow. They're co-evolved with the other plants in the ecosystem for thousands of years. So yeah, just leave it alone. It does look better if you water it, but then you're going to weed it, and then it's this cycle of.
Interesting. Okay, Scott Kemp, have you done commercial areas, i.e. parking lot and bigger buildings?
Yeah, Grace Farms.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
I think they did 30,000 plugs at one time or something, but it was, my favorite part of all the places we've planted around here at Grace Farms is the butterfly milkweed, AKA butterfly weed, is by far my favorite native plant, because the bees and the butterflies go crazy to it. And it's a really beautiful milkweed. Instead of the big one with the white, fluffy on it, this one is actually a beautiful orange flowers, and they're just incredible. So my favorite plant, if anybody wants to just plant something in a planter or plant something in their backyard in a flower garden, is butterfly milkweed. But I'm biased. They're my favorite.
Yeah, and they're also the host plant for baby monarchs too. So
now we're talking.
Yeah. Okay, 2 questions from Margaret Thomas. Garlic mustard is abundant in my woods. How can I control it, or should I let it be in control? I like that. And how can we get various ethnic communities, I think that she means, interested in your efforts? Ethic communities? I'm not sure if she means ethic.
Yeah, the garlic mustard is really tough. So we have these opportunity windows with garlic mustard as well. So it's a biennial. 1 year it's in flower, or it's in rosette form for a year, and then the second year it shoots up a stem. One of the most efficient ways to manage it is string trimming it, not all the way down to the ground, but just below the flower and seed head, and string trim that whole area down, and it reduces the seed population. You actually eliminate a generation of the garlic mustard. Sometimes it requires 2 or 3 string trimmings. It's done later in the season, right before it sets seed, right after it flowers. And alternatively, it's just about finding these windows of opportunity for timing, seeding, and biennial. So you have 3. It's also a broadleaf. So there are herbicide options, but I'd recommend string trimming it first. I've seen some people carpet mulch, but then you obviously have to put back all the native species that you're smothering on the ground. So
And I find that it comes early enough, and as it starts to flower, you realize your window for getting it out of there before the seeds come is, and so you're like super motivated to get out there and get them. Yeah, I've been just pulling it before it flowers and moving like a sort of a Maginot line down my yard. And
Yeah.
it's working. Okay, Diane Cook, I'm horribly allergic to poison ivy. I'm clearing a large section of woods of invasives, but cannot get so close to poison to pull it. What do you recommend?
That would be a scenario of hiring someone to pull it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can't pull it yourself, you hire someone to pull it or treat it with an herbicide that eliminates it, but you still need someone to come in and remove it because the oils are still going to be active on the plant after the fact.
And would that be true if you put down if you tarped it with black tarp and left it for a year, it would still be in there and would still be?
Yep. And yeah, and to Mark's point, like no matter how you kill it and choose to kill it, I always default to herbicide because I'm like, it's faster. And
It's
we
important
often have people
It's
that,
important.
yeah, and people, there's always an organic alternative. And so, you know, tarping is a great alternative. Carpet mulching, where you put down cardboard and then mulch on top of that, suffocates it. That's a good one because you then don't have to peel anything up and remove it, get it decompose underneath that layer. But again, if you do that, you have to then replace something new on top of it because you have new clean mulch to deal with.
Well, you can go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that poison ivy is a native plant and that it is really important for migrating birds. The berries are very, very rich in nutrients that birds need when they're about to make their long flight. So if it's in a place that you're not going to go and you can leave it, you know, that's what I'm experimenting with in the bottom part of my yard.
I love that. I will say one of my favorite spots in the fall is when the poison ivy changes color. It's an incredible red. It's an incredible red, and it goes up the dead, you know, some of our crags that we have that we leave for bird habitat. And I have to say, it's actually a really beautiful plant in fall. Also, I'm told by my parents that I ate poison ivy when I was a kid, so I seem to be superhuman and not allergic, but I know that'll change. You know, next time I touch it, I'll get it all over my body. But so you can call me, I'll come in and
you need to go to Diane's house and help her. But there's also a specialist moth, I think it's a moth or a butterfly that I'm forgetting the name of, that has to have poison ivy to lay its eggs on. So it's sort of like a relationship like the monarch. So just to know that even if you can't get rid of it all, you are accidentally doing good for this moth and for the birds.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't mean to jump in, but I think Louise makes a really good point. Like just because we as humans don't like something or don't appreciate how something looks doesn't mean that something doesn't need it to sustain its life and system. I think it's really about choosing the lens for which you want to view your surroundings that helps you understand the beauty and the complexity of what's taking place around you. I'm highly allergic to poison ivy, but it is phenomenal the amount of berry production it has. It's actually a sub shrub, and it just, once it gets going, it's almost as massive as a tree. And the amount of birds up there, there's mowing on all those red berries. It is incredibly important for that. I didn't know about the moth, which is, you know, added bonus. So if it's in an area you don't have to touch, leave it alone. You don't, you know, as humans, we don't need to be in every inch of our outdoor environment for sure.
It's not one of the vines that will kill the tree because it's not a squeezing wrapping vine. So
that's
anyway,
great.
My PR moment for poison ivy. Okay, my anonymous attendee says, Louise, my standard question. This, I don't think I know who this is. How long to leave black plastic tarp on mugwort to kill it? I'm now seeing that 7 months is not enough. Also, when seeding a native mix, when is the best time of year to do so, spring or fall, and what machine to use for small site, e.g. 1 acre?
Wow.
That's a lot of questions.
There's a lot of questions. There's a great scientist, and I apologize, I forgot her name. I presented with her at the Ecological Landscape Alliance March conference in 2019. And she did specific research with University of New Hampshire on tarp duration, tarp color, temperature regulation of the tarp, solarization versus tarp. And I don't remember if there were specifics for the plant, but I think it was at least a year. And it didn't matter the color so much. It just mattered that you kept it sealed around the edges for a year on that site specifically. That was the best way to get the most efficient kill, and also mowing it prior to installing that to get it flat to the ground. What are some of these other questions here?
Oh yeah, and then the other was about when to put a native seed mix down. Is it better to do spring or fall? What machine?
It's a tough question because it's either or. I like fall now more, but you have to live with a bare site longer. But with fall, if you have 20 species in a seed mix, maybe 10 of them require winter stratification. So then you have a following spring where you have all 20 species germinating. If you do a late spring, early summer seeding, the 10 species that require overwintering and stratification won't germinate until the following year. So you only have 10 species that are competing against your invasives. But yeah, it's whatever you can tolerate. Small sites, we use either a Harley rake or a power dethatcher or power rake, vertical mower type thing.
And I read to put it down just before the first freeze. Is that right? Is that necessary, or just?
It's about site preparation. If the site is clean, I've seeded in snow and had phenomenal results. Like we've had 3 feet of snow and I've gone out and broadcasted seed on top of the snow, and people are like, this is not going to work. The client was literally out there with me like, you're crazy, this is stupid, like I'm just throwing my money away, I see the birds eating it. I have a phenomenal photo that I like shot and sent back to them, and I was like, remember when we had that walk in middle of January? And it came in beautifully. So it's really about site preparation.
I mean, that's what happens in nature. Those seeds are blowing into the snow. And so, okay, are mosquito dunks really okay?
I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, that's what you put into like a vernal pool that is supposedly just kills the mosquito larvae and doesn't harm other things. And I have been told by people I trust that those are okay because of the way they work. And I should know more about that. I'm going to do more research. It doesn't feel right to me to put something in a vernal pool. So, but I think if you have a real mosquito problem, certainly better than spraying, which is ineffective and also just kills everything else. So anytime you're going after the larvae in the water, that is the best way to deal with mosquitoes if they're a problem versus spraying. And I think the dunks are okay, but I want to feel free to email me. I'll do some dunks research before I say that with a full confidence. So Roberta is saying from Roberta Barbieri from Columbine is saying she wears a Tyvek suit to remove the poison ivy. That's what I do in my yard too. Like those Playtex gloves, like a long sleeve shirt, just covered, and then those go in the trash and just pull it up. It's doable. I just did it and I'm okay so far. So, and then one more question from Teresa, we were talking to at the very beginning about those large skunk cabbage that she says they look like skunk cabbage, but they last till fall. Do you know what that is? What that plant is? I'm gonna have to go look at that.
Yeah.
Oh no, or maybe that was Suzanne. This is somebody else. Okay, Teresa wants to know if you have experience with organic herbicide Finalsan, Finalsa.
Just looking it up now. I don't know what the active ingredient is in it.
There's one thing, if you have a question like that, more generally, the Xerces Society, which is XERCES, Invertebrate Society, has a list of organic pesticides and how they affect pollinators. So some are mildly toxic to pollinators, some that we think of as very mild sounding because their extracts from plants are actually harmful to pollinators. So before you use something, just really the thing to do is to figure out what plants you have and to figure out what's in the pesticide, and then to do your homework on the effects that those, even if they're organic, that what they might have on the pollinators. And I recommend Xerces as a good place to go for that.
Yeah, that's a good point you point out, Louise, because I've heard that even when if people apply, because it's very in to apply cedar oil to lawns for ticks, but I've heard that it also all the insects are affected by cedar oil, is what I've been told.
And cedar oil is a repellent, right, Penn?
Yeah.
But it also dries out the insects or something, right?
It dries out the exoskeleton and actually acts as like an acid on your skin and actually burns the exoskeleton of the plants. And it's the problem with cedar oil is it's great. It doesn't last long in the landscape, but everything it touches, it burns and damages. It's not just selective.
I know, it's crazy.
Oh, I know that about it.
Kills everything.
It's also, if you're going to plant for pollinators, you don't want to put these repellents that Like you don't want to
Good
use
point. Yeah.
wood chips, right? I realized suddenly, oh, we shouldn't use cedar wood chips if we're trying to attract pollinators.
Pollinators, right. It's like your grandmother's closet with cedar walls, that was meant to get rid of the insects. That's true. But I would love to just say, on another solution that we didn't talk about, which I know you're working on, Louise, which is really exciting, and we do that in our paddocks here at Grace Farms. Is we do we basically, they call them pollinator lawns, where you just mow your lawn once every 3 weeks or once a month, and you allow some of those beneficial small flowers to grow up, the clover and the, certain plants will grow up, and that's beneficial to the pollinators. And then you can mow it once every 3 weeks or whatever. And I hear that it's really great for pollinators, and it's a great way for people to get involved, even if they can't afford to do a big, native meadow installation. They can get involved and start creating pollinator habitat. Is that what you found, Louise and Penn?
Yeah, so to that point, like I love that idea. It's like my favorite thing when someone's like, "Oh, I have a small backyard, but I can't afford to spend X number of dollars on a live plant." So I think my recommendation is always just pick the areas that you use every week to hang out in your lawn, and just stop mowing the rest. See what happens. See what comes up. You'd probably be pleasantly surprised that you'll see a lot of goldenrods and things.
Goldenrod.
That's like,
I am cheering because we did no mow May. We always do no mow May now that we know about it. And a common milkweed came up right in the middle of my lawn. I was like, oh my gosh. We are inspired by Grace Farms when we do let the lawn grow like that. We mow the edges so that it looks intentional and it looks neat. It's cool. It's like pathways through the lawn and stuff. Okay, I was not looking at the chat and there were so many more questions.
Oh, good.
So, we got to move to the chat. So here is, I am an architect who works with builders. Usually the builder hires us. I wish I could convince them to add meadow to the site where a new house is built. Native plants for pollinators. Oh, which native plants for pollinators? Any thoughts on how to convince them? Occasionally I need to specify plants for a commercial project. I try to use native species. Any ideas?
Yeah, I mean, native plants, builders actually don't see the value in it because it's a lot of upfront cost. But if they're maintaining, or building to sell, like spec builders, meadow from seed and native plants have less maintenance, so you don't have to worry about maintenance as much. They have less inputs, so it's actually, and they'll restore all the compacted junky soil that they've dug up and spread around the whole site. So it's multi-layered, and it's not only about just doing obviously you want to do the right thing, but it's also going to be beneficial to them if they can't sell the units or can't sell the building or can't occupy it, and they have to bear the burden of maintenance. If your maintenance is literally over 20 years going to be, half of what a turf grass lawn is, then you're going to win. And the amount of water, irrigation, usually what I say is like, you can lose the irrigation system and you could probably gain $10,000 towards your meadow.
There you go. Exactly. And I mean, what I've been told is that a lot of people around these areas that we live in, they build big houses. The clients want native, they want natural, they want pesticide free, they want this. So it's actually a selling point. You can make it a selling point to your clients that these are natural native meadows that are benefiting benefiting Mother Nature and creating habitat, and you can actually make it a selling point.
Yeah, I think this is a process. And I mean, thank you, Krista, for talking to the builders, because, we have to talk to the suppliers, our nurseries, and we have to ask for pesticide-free native plants. We have to ask builders, we have to show that there's a demand for this, and that the aesthetic is changing. What we see as beautiful is changing. We want a yard full of life. Like, I mean, Doug Ptolemy, most of you probably have seen him speak. We've gotten some municipal officials to come to those talks, and wow, he's just so good at giving people the religion on this. And the town of Wilton, for one, has put in its plan of conservation and development that native plants have to be used in new development. We're working on that in Norwalk. So I think that it is a process, and it's up to people like Krista, architects, who recognize that things are changing. I mean, another person to try to get people to see is like Edwina von Gall. If you guys have seen her speak, she's out in the Hamptons. She's doing what Penn is doing. for these big fancy like Hampton mansions, they're have wildness and native plants. I just think the more beautiful places like Grace Farms, get them over to Grace Farms where they can see the meadows that look intentional, the edges are clean. It's a new understanding of what's beautiful and its process.
There we go. Let's consider wild areas just as beautiful as a manicured, monoculture lawn. I mean, I'll just say on a big picture note, in Connecticut alone, we have 250,000 acres of lawn. Okay. And that could all be, even if we converted 1/5 of that, to a pollinator friendly lawn, plants, that's 50,000. 1/5 of that's 50,000, acres. So it's exciting what we can all do to make a difference.
Yeah, totally. And Penn, we were going to try to talk about, it doesn't have to always be a meadow. It can,
Native plants.
Shrubs, trees are meadows in the sky, we say.
Yeah.
But in a lot of times that it feels easier to people and less, I don't know.
I think it's a lot easier for people to go out and buy a single butterfly weed plant it, appreciate that flower year one, see the monarchs hanging out on it, and it's just like if you have an instant connection to that plant, you see its full life cycle. It's a lot harder for somebody to go out and plant a $50 oak tree and say, boy, in 75 years, this is going to be pretty spectacular and supporting 400 or 500 moth species that are going to be pollinating the entire area.
Yeah.
It's a much harder concept to grasp. So yeah, it doesn't have
once you realize it, like I honestly, I don't think until 5 years ago, I really paid attention to the fact that trees bloom.
Yes.
And then you look
my
like
gosh.
the red maple covered in those amazing flowers and covered with the early bees and those early the queen bumblebees that are emerging from the ground first, have not laid their eggs yet. They really need our early blooming shrubs like the rhododendron and the spice bush and the tree blooms. Like they're critical because without them, they can't go back and lay their eggs and we won't have our.
And it's also about insect life cycle and habitat life cycle. It's not just, there's a lot of different trophic levels that we have to support here, all the way from fungi and soil and nematodes. You're talking about like small rodents and birds and insects, and like they're in large mammalian species, reptilian species. There's so much going on and they all coordinate and play with each other. If this bird has a tree that it can live in and hang out in and can feed off of the insects in the meadow, like that's symbiosis. That's what makes restoring wildlife so magical. You can't just plant a tree and then hope it all works. That's why there's nothing going on in a city where you have a single oak tree. But if you have a single oak tree underplanted with Pennsylvania sedge and a couple of perennials, you now have a habitat and you have a life cycle here that supports insects, and they can feed off of each other, and the bird can hang out there and feed on the bottom and nest its young in that tree. There's, you got your store, your house, your communities all in that tree.
And
that gives me hope.
Yeah, you have a balance. And so I think Doug Ptolemy says in his talks, part of the problem we have with Lyme disease is we've reduced, we don't have a balance. We have deer and, white-footed mouse, and we got lots of ticks. But if you have a yard that's full of, you have possums and birds and bats and, all the beneficial insects there, you don't just end up with these extreme problems.
There you go, because possums eat more ticks than anything in the entire forest. So, and turkeys. I mean, these things are meant for. That's what they do. So, I agree with you. Let's just embrace wild in our own backyards. And you're right. We don't have to plant a whole meadow. You can pick a few species of native plants and plant them, just a handful, and spread them, throughout an area and make a flower garden with them, and you can make a huge difference. So. By the way, Louise, have you all shared the pollinator-pathway.org website? Because everybody on this call, I mean, that's pollinator-pathway.org. That's where I go for all the plants, all the resources you could ever need. So I really just promote you all because it's what I use as well. So
it's also a place where people that are working on this project can share ideas. We have on the homepage now is a blog that is always changing, and so we try to put up like news about an invasive bug or a new whatever the new news is in the pollinator world. And just tonight our people that are here are giving us so much good information. Like AJ is telling me that there are mosquito dunks in her rain barrel, and grain barrels, and gray tree frogs have laid eggs and they are turning into pollywogs. So yeah.
All right, now we're
There's
talking.
your answer on that. This is the great thing about the Pollinator Pathway website is it is an exchange of ideas among all these different people that are working on this. And then Krista is letting us know that poison ivy, when she pulls it up, she washes the edges of her gloves where it meets the skin with Dawn soap. Or if she accidentally brushes against it, it really works. So I have been just using, I always get that tech new expensive stuff, but I've been using dish soap because it's a grease cutter. I think I'm with Krista on that Dawn might be,
It's really about
there on
watching
your
the
wrist
oil.
that you get
Yeah,
it at
it's
the end
really
of
about getting that oil off because it's an oil
always, yeah.
putting grease on your hands. It just causes a rash. It's urethol. It's actually the resin is used in ancient Japanese art of kintsugi to repair pottery, and then actually urethol
Cool.
resin. So
The
Cool.
poison ivy resin
Yes.
because it's so sticky and durable.
sticky, and you set it, and you repair your china or whatever your ceramics, and then you let it cure for 3 to 4 weeks. And
Wow, another reason not to take out that poison ivy. Like,
And the good news is because you have such bad poison ivy on your hands, you can't pick up the pot, so it cures well. No, I'm just kidding. No, listen, it's so wonderful to see everybody, and I'm just grateful to be able to have been here tonight because I feel like we talk about the very important stuff of how the heck do we do this, but also it's wonderful to be able to share the big picture. So I'm grateful to everybody. Do we have any more questions, Louise?
There's one more about long lawns. If I let my lawn grow, when should I mow it? I haven't mowed yet this year and it looks great, but I'm sure I need to mow at some point. I think it depends on the year. Like it actually got last year. I don't think we mowed until like late into June, but I have mowed. My partner actually mowed in the middle of our non-mowed thing. She mowed out a badminton court. So we just have the net up and the edges are the tall grass. But that was like, at least we did some mowing. So.
Well, yeah, and if you mow around the edge of the lawn and you let the grass grow tall, I mean, it's amazing the amount of animals that'll come back in and lie down and bed down and make, the rabbits and everything comes back. It's just, I did it at my mom's lawn at her place, and the neighbors were like, "Oh my God, have they abandoned the house?" And once you mow around the edge, it all looks good and everybody gets happy, and then the life comes back. So it's a new movement, and natural is beautiful. So let's go for it.
But you do have to mow before it's so heavy that your mower can't handle it.
yes,
I have an electric mower in it.
yeah, to that point, what we recommend is it depends on the species of grass that's there, but we'll go in late June, early July, and string trim over the top to take the wispy brown out of it and take the seed heads out of it, and still leave it long and floppy. And
there you go.
It actually will rejuvenate itself. That cool season comes in late August, early September, and it regrows again and reflushes out. So you can just go over the top, keep it at 8 inches tall.
With just a weed whacker.
Yep, just weed whacker, string trimmer.
Wow.
Perfect.
Okay. More tips here on yellow soap. Fell's naphtha, aka yellow soap, is great before and after to deter getting poison ivy rash. Before and after, that's interesting. I'm writing that down. I gotta get that.
Well,
that's it on our questions here.
That's great. I mean, once again, let me invite everybody to come out in the fall and see the meadows, because they're going to be blooming and they're going to be going, Penn, it's just incredible out here in September, October even. It's just so beautiful. And you see each phase of different plants as they come up and the flowers bloom, and then the next one comes up. So it'll be beautiful. So I just want to invite everybody else. We have our garden. It's all vegan and, natural. And it's so come on out, come out, and Louise and Pollinator Pathway, you are always welcome here, and everybody that's a part of it, and Penn, always welcome, as you know. So, thank you from our end. I'm grateful to have been able to partake in this, and thank you to everybody. Thank you, Laurie Bachmann and Ridgefield Library.
Yeah, thanks, Ridgefield, for the whole
Thank
Pollinator Pathway
you.
series. It's been so great. All the talks have been,
It's been a great series, and we had wonderful attendance. We had about 40 people followed tonight, so it was great. And thank you, Mark and Penn and Louise, for a very informative and excellent presentation. I think we had a lively set of questions afterwards and talk amongst ourselves, and so much wonderful, valuable information. So anyway, thank you very much. And thank you for everyone who participated in the Q&A. We wish you a very good night. Thanks.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody. Take
Bye-bye.
care. See you in the wild.
Fun to
In the
talk.
wild.
Bye.